The Satanic Mill by Otfried Preussler, the first year. 1. The Mill. It was between New Year's Day and Twelfth Night, and Krabbet, who was 14 at the time, had joined forces with 2 other Wendish beggar boys. Although His Most Serene Highness the Elector of Saxony had passed a law forbidding vagabonds to beg in His Most Holy Serene Highness's lands, but luckily the justices and those in authority would often turn a blind eye, the boys were going from village to village in the country around the Hoyerswerda, dressed as the 3 kings from the east. They wore straw crowns on top of their caps, and one of them, little Lobosch from Markendorf, was playing the part of the king of the Moors, blackened his face with soot every morning. He walked proudly at the head of the little procession, bearing the Star of Bethlehem, which Krabbet had nailed to a stick. Whenever they came to a farm, they would put Lobosch in the middle and sing, "Hosanna to the Son of David," or rather 2 of them would sing, while Krabbet merely moved his lips silently because his voice was breaking. The other 2 kings sang all the louder to make up for it. A good many farmers had killed a pig for the new year, and they would give the 3 kings from the east plenty of sausages and bacon. At other houses, they got apples, nuts and prunes, and sometimes gingerbread and lardy cake, aniseed balls and cinnamon cookies. "Here's a good start to the year," said Lubosh. At the end of the 3rd day, "I could go on this way till New Year's Eve." Their Majesties, the other 2 kings, nodded solemnly and sighed. "We wouldn't mind that at all." They spent the next night in the hayloft of the smithy at Petershane, and it was there that Krabbet dreamed his strange dream for the first time. There were 11 ravens sitting on a perch looking at him. He saw an empty place down at the end of the perch on the left, and then he heard a voice. It was a hoarse voice, and it seemed to be coming out of thin air from very far away, and it called him by name, but he did not dare reply. "Krabbet," called the voice a second time, and then a 3rd time, "Krabbet." Then it said, "Come to the mill at Schwarzkolm, and you will not regret it." At these words, the ravens rose from their perch, croaking, "Obey the voice of the master! Obey!" With that, Krabbet woke. What a strange dream, he thought, turning over and dropping off to sleep again. The next day, he and his companions walked on, and when he happened to think of the ravens, he laughed. However, he dreamed the same dream again the next night. Once more, the voice called him by his name, and once more the ravens croaked, "Obey!" This set Krabbet thinking, and the next morning he asked the farmer who had given him shelter for the night if he knew of a village called Schwarzkolm, or some such name. The farmer remembered hearing the name. "Schwarzkolm," he said reflectively. "Oh, yes. It's in the forest of Hoyerswerda, on the road to Leip. There's a village called Schwarzkolm there." The 3 kings spent the next night at a barn in Grossparwitz, and there too Krabbet dreamed his dream of the ravens and the voice that seemed to be coming out of thin air. Everything happened just as before, and now he made up his mind to follow the voice. He crept out of the barn at daybreak, while his companions were still asleep. At the gate of the farmyard, he met the servant girl going to the well. "Say goodbye to my 2 friends for me," he asked her. "I have to leave them now." At every village he came to, Krabbet asked the way. The wind drove the falling snow into his face, and he kept having to stop and wipe his eyes. He got lost in the forest of Hoyerswerda, and it took him a good 2 hours to find the road to Leip again. So it was that he did not reach his journey's end until nearly evening. Schwarzkolm was like any of the other moorland villages, with a long line of houses and barns on either side of the street, which was deep in snow. Plumes of smoke rose above the rooftops, and Krabbet saw steaming middens and heard the lowing of cattle. There were children skating on the duck pond, shouting with glee. Krabbet looked around for a mill, but he could not see one. There was an old man carrying a bundle of sticks coming up the road, and Krabbet asked him. "No, there is no mill in this village," he was told. "Is there one nearby?" "Oh, if that's the one you mean," the old man jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Back there in the fen of Kossel, by the Blackwater, there's a mill, but And he broke off as though he had already said too much. Crabbit thanked him and turned in the direction the old man had pointed. He had gone only a few paces when he felt someone pluck him by the sleeve, and when he looked around, it was the old man with the bundle of sticks again. "What is it?" Crabbit asked. Coming closer and looking cautiously around, the old man said, "I just wanted to warn you, boy, keep away from the Castle Fen, keep away from the mill by the Black Water. It's a queer place that—" Crabbit hesitated for a moment, then he turned from the old man and went on his way out of the village. Dusk was gathering. He had to take great care not to stray from the path, and he was shivering with cold. When he turned his head, he saw lights begin to flicker in the village he had left behind. Here one, there another. Might it not be wiser to turn back? "Oh, come," muttered Crabbit, pulling him up his collar. "I'm not a baby. It won't hurt just to take a look at this mill." For some time, Crabbit groped his way blindly through the wood until he came upon an open space. As he was emerging from the trees, the clouds cleared away, the moon came through, and suddenly everything was flooded in cold moonlight. Then he saw the mill. It lay there before him, a hunched shape in the snow, dark and menacing, like some vicious, powerful animal lying in wait for its prey. "I don't have to go there," thought Crabbit, but then, telling himself he was a coward, he plucked up his courage and stepped forward out of the shadows of the wood. Striding boldly up to the mill, he found the door of the house closed and knocked. He knocked once, he knocked twice. There was no movement inside the house. No dog barked, no step creaked, no bundle of keys rattled, nothing. Crabbit knocked for a third time, so hard that it hurt his knuckles. All was still quiet inside the mill. He tried the door handle, and the door opened. It was not even bolted. Crabbit walked into the hall of the house. It was silent as the grave and pitch dark, but right at the end of the passage there was a faint gleam of light, just the glimmer of a glimmer. "There's sure to be someone around if there's a light," said Crabbit to himself. Arms outstretched, he groped his way forward. As he came closer, he saw that the light was coming through a chink in the door at the end of the passage. Suddenly, full of curiosity, he crept up to the chink on tiptoe and peered through it. He saw a room lit by the light of a single candle. The room was all black, and the candle red. It was stuck in a skull that lay on a table in the middle of the room. Behind the table sat a burly man in dark clothes. His face was very pale, white as a sheet. He had a black patch over his left eye. A thick, leather-bound book lay chained to the table in front of him, and he was reading this book. Suddenly, he raised his head and gazed around the room, as if he had detected Crabbit behind the chink in the door. His glance froze the boy to the marrow of his bones. Crabbit's eye, glued to the chink, began to itch, and then to stream, and his view of the room blurred. Crabbit rubbed his eye, then he felt a cold, icy hand placed on his shoulder from behind. The chill of it went right through his coat and his shirt. At the same time, he heard a hoarse voice say, in the Wendish language, "So here you are." Crabbit jumped. He knew that voice. When he turned around, he was facing the man with the patch over his eye. How had he gotten there? One thing was certain. He had not come through the door. The man was holding a candlestick in his hand. The man who was holding a candlestick in his hand looked Crabbit up and down in silence. Then, thrusting out his chin, he said, "I am the master of the mill. You can be my apprentice if you like. I'm in need of one. Would you like that?" Crabbit heard himself reply, "Yes, I would," his voice sounding strange, as if it did not belong to him at all. "And what am I to teach you? How to grind grain, or the rest as well?" inquired the master miller. "The rest as well," said Crabbit. The miller held out his left hand. "Done!" At the very moment that they shook hands, a muffled thudding and rumbling sound started up somewhere in the house. It seemed to come from deep down. The floor quivered, the walls began to tremble, the beams and doorposts shook. Crabbit cried out and tried to run. All he wanted was to get away from this place, but the miller barred his way. "The mill!" he cried, cupping his hands around his mouth. "The mill is grinding again!" And that is the end of chapter 1.